Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Andy Burnham with your top stories. European and US futures gain as the US and Iran agree to halt strikes ahead of talks set for this week. South Korea goes big on AI, with Samsung and SK Hynix reportedly set to power a $1.3 trillion decade-long push into memory, data centers and robotics. Plus, Andy Burnham will pledge England's biggest devolution of power in modern times in his first major economic speech as he looks to become the UK's next Prime Minister. Well, happy Monday. Coming to the close of Q2, the end of the first half, and here is the picture in markets. Asian stocks slipping as we see a rotation out of tech into healthcare and consumer products. We're waiting for a key investment announcement out of South Korea. The Kospi at the moment is weaker, 2.4%. But futures pointing higher on both sides of the Atlantic, thanks to the reports that the US and Iran have pulled back from a fresh escalation of their conflict. Axios reporting that both sides have agreed to halt strikes and meet in Qatar to resume talks. Now, flip cross-asset and correspondingly, oil has eased from its session high. Brent still, though, up 0.5% at $72 a barrel. Gold, declining on the inflation concerns. We're down nearly 1% now at $4,049 a troy ounce. And treasuries are a touch weaker. We're up a basis point on the 10-year yield at 4.38%. And now looking ahead to the meeting of central bankers in Sintra, as well as that slew of US jobs reports out this week. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the risk events on the agenda for today. At 8 a.m. London time, we'll get Spanish inflation numbers for June, expected to have declined to 3.4%, even as VAT on household energy bills rises. Then at 10 a.m. London time, we'll broaden the lens to Eurozone consumer confidence. We'll see how that inflationary backdrop is impacting sentiment. And finally, what does it all mean for central bankers? Well, we'll be hearing at 6:30 p.m. London time from the European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde in Portugal. And the Sintra Summit this year focused on AI. But, of course, the backdrop is that inflationary shock of the Iran war. So plenty ahead. Let's get started. Well, as we're waiting for the beginning of that event in South Korea, let us take a look at Asian markets, where stocks a little changed as investors continue that rotation out of tech. We can go straight to Winnie Su in Hong Kong for an update. Winnie, what's catching your eye today?
Yeah, good morning, Lizzie. As just mentioned, Asian stocks under a bit of pressure as this rotation away from the tech stocks that have done extremely well so far this year continues, especially as investors rebalance their portfolios at the end of the month as well as the end of the quarter. And that's why we are seeing Japan's Nikkei 225, which is a tech-heavy gauge, underperforming the broader topics gauge. And in fact, on the topics index, we are seeing retail pharmaceuticals gaining. And that rotation is also going into tech stocks in Hong Kong. We are seeing the HS Tech here up more than 3% after having its worst week since October and coming into that oversold territory. Now, you flip the board and take a look at the Korean assets because, as you mentioned, all eyes on that ongoing announcement from President Lee Jae-myung. And we are also expecting Samsung and SK to announce that $1.3 trillion worth of investment over the next decade to fund its expansion of capacity into the country's southwest areas. Now, this is likely going to have a significant impact on the economy, but also we are hearing some concerns if this capex is really running ahead of itself right now, and also a bit of more concerns when it comes to the report saying that Apple is considering potentially sourcing its memory chips from Chinese memory chip makers. So that raises the question how far these Asian chip makers can keep their pricing power. Now, flip the board, we also take a look at the Asian air conditioner sector because this massive and intense heat wave hitting that side of your side of the region, Lizzie, is actually raising the demand for the Asian air conditioners. And that is coming as the French government also setting aside €100 million worth of emergency funds to support the equipment for the hospitals. Back to you, Lizzie.
Really interesting. The way to invest in this heat wave. Winnie, thank you for the update. That's Winnie Su out of Hong Kong. Well, let's take a look now at what's powering US futures higher. As I say, we've got S&P E-minis up 0.5% right now. And it comes back to the geopolitics. The US and Iran having agreed to halt attacks on each other ahead of peace talks resuming in Doha this week. The de-escalation comes after the two sides blamed each other for breaching the fragile ceasefire amid strikes on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go now to Bloomberg's John Herskovitz for an update. John, good morning. We have talks due to continue in Qatar, but the background are these strikes. How are negotiations going?
Yeah, the negotiations are still on track, but we saw the most serious violence and attacks between the two sides since this interim agreement was reached. There's a lot that needs to be done in these talks. Bloomberg spoke to a U.S. official who said that all the items of the Memorandum of Understanding are going to be up for discussion. There have only been a few days of technical talk so far. One of the key issues, of course, is going to be control of the Strait of Hormuz, whether they're going to be tolls charged by Iran and possibly Oman. But you have a slew of other issues, the biggest of which is the nuclear issue. And the time frame to get these things done is 60 days. And if you just think about the time frame for the nuclear issue under the Obama administration, it took nearly 2 years to negotiate that deal. So there's a lot to be done. Both sides are pointing the finger at each other, blaming them for violating the ceasefire, the most serious violence that's happened since the interim agreement. But it did not derail the talks that are set for this week.
Well, yeah, just give us some colour on what attacks happened over the weekend. Really a lot of action since Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. It started Thursday with Iran attacking a container ship, commercial container ship. And then the U.S. attacked Iranian targets. Next, Iran targeted a Qatari oil tanker. U.S. went back. Iran then launched attacks on neighboring states in the Gulf, I think Bahrain and Kuwait. No fatalities, but this just served as a warning to shippers about how dangerous the situation is. Before this these back and forth attacks, shipping had gotten to about 70 transits a day. This is it's significantly higher than before, but still below the daily averages of about 100, 130, 135 before the strait was closed. And it just also underscores how important control of the strait is for Iran. This is one of its big cards in the negotiation. It really wants to keep its control of this. It says that the language in the Memorandum of Understanding helps support its position, but the U.S. has also drawn a red line about tolls and charging ships for transit of the strait. So this will be an issue that's front and center as the two sides are set for talks this week.
John, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's John Herskovitz there. Well, of course, the geopolitics has been feeding into the macro outlook, and we've been hearing from the Richmond Fed President Richard Barkin warning that US inflation is too high, describing modestly restrictive policy as appropriate, given his view that businesses are adding to inflation's persistence through price setting. We can go now to Mark Cranfield, Bloomberg MLive strategist. Morning, Mark. So this is going to be a topic for central bankers at Sintra this week out of Portugal. We also have Thursday's US jobs report on the agenda. What should investors be focusing on as we head into the second half of the year?
Yeah, morning, Lizzie. I think the highlight for most investors will be anything that Kevin Walsh has to say. He's only speaking, though, on a panel. He doesn't give an individual address, but certainly depending on what questioning he's given there, he may well have a chance to express some of his views on monetary policy, where he sees it going. Now, it's very important because of where traders are pricing the market. So we're going to hear from the governor of the Bank of England, we're going to hear from Christine Lagarde, and we're going to hear from Kevin Walsh over the period of the week. And in all cases, traders expect at least one interest rate hike from each of those central banks, either before year end or early into next year. And now's an opportunity for each of them to push back a bit. If they think that pricing is incorrect, if they think traders have got ahead of themselves, now's the time when they may well use a few words to try and dilute some of that impact on the market. So that's really why people are very much looking forward, particularly to Mr. Walsh, because he has said in the past that he doesn't really like to give guidance very much. But if he sees a big disconnect between what investors are expecting and where he sees the situation, now's the time that he might want to do something about it. As you say, there's also a lot of data coming out this week. We've also got an ISM report, we've got the jobs report, plenty for people to factor in, considering that last week the PCE confirmed that inflation is around the 4% area, way too high from the Fed's point of view. So clearly the market has shifted its focus. It does expect interest rates to remain relatively high in the short term. But at some stage, those lower oil prices will come in, and then we'll get a CPI report in a couple of weeks' time. So really the combination of the data and the Fed speak is really going to have the chance for plenty of volatility in the yield curve. And I guess we're going to talk about what's happening in the Treasury curve right now.
Yeah, completely. We were seeing some of the world's biggest bond investors, Mark, zeroing in on 5-year Treasuries. Why is that the sweet spot?
Some of that is really a reaction to what's happened over the past few weeks, where because people were heavily focused on curve flattening and they were using the 5-year to short against particularly 30-year sector. So the 5 years really got out of line. If you look at, they called it the butterfly trade, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year trades, or even longer. And that's really got out of whack, which makes the 5-year look relatively cheap compared to the rest of the curve. So it's really a trading setup for some of the major houses in the short term. But if Kevin Warsh doesn't push back against the interest rate hike this week, the 5-year will not perform particularly well by the time he has to speak, and of course the data that follows as well. So it's very much a short-term thing. The 5-year may look a bit cheap right now, but if we do proceed to the idea that the Federal Reserve is going to tighten policy before the end of the year, then the 5-year will fall back in line and will be one of the most vulnerable parts, because people will be looking for a big flattening between the very long end of the curve and the shorter end of the curve, and that's exactly where the 5-year tends to get hit. So it's really more of a short-term thing, but Bloomberg does have a very interesting story today on some of the big players which are currently looking for value in the middle of the curve.
We certainly do. Shout out to Michael McKenzie and GG on that story. Worth reading on the terminal. Mark Cranfield, thank you for your analysis. That's our Bloomberg M Live strategist. Well, still ahead on Daybreak Europe, the Prosus and Naspers group, known for its early bet on Tencent, has full-year results out this morning, and we'll be speaking to the CEO, Fabricio Bloisi, on tech investing as well as the company's acquisition drive. So that conversation coming up later on in the programme. But first, we'll bring you more on South Korea's mega AI spending plans. We've been hearing from the president in the past few minutes, and this is as the country seeks to keep hold of its memory chip crown. So we'll dive into all the details for you next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, 6:15 a.m. here in London. Turning to tech now, Anthropic has won US approval to restore some access to its Mythos 5 AI model after resolving the Trump administration's concerns over the tech's potential threats to national security. Now, the clearance allows access for certain trusted partners, but Anthropic's other AI model, Fable 5, continues to remain restricted. Let's get more now with Bloomberg senior strategist Neil Campling. He joins me in studio. Neil, good morning. So just break it down for us. What do we know about who actually has access now?
So we know it's a limited list of trusted partners, likely to be US technology firms. It appears the US government are now happy enough that the controls are in place to prevent sort of cybersecurity hacking of the code itself. So it shows that the government and the company have worked towards this resolution over the last 2 weeks. It restores access to these companies, and of course the AI models are moving at such a fast pace. The access was very important to get that through to again. Now, there are other reports over the weekend that China have caught up with some of the US models in terms of the cybersecurity protocols and about the resilience in terms of what they offer, and also the ability to find where there are flaws in existing coded systems that have previously been undetected. So we've had good progress in terms of the AI models over the last couple of weeks. It's great to hear that there is some progress that's taken place, but it's still not ready for general consumption by everyone. That's quite clear.
And so if Anthropic has resolved some of the Trump administration's concerns, does that mean that the path is clear to the IPO?
Well, we certainly can hope that that the path is clearer now. And Anthropic will obviously want to come to the market at some point when they're having the growth and the financials that support getting as high a valuation as possible. It's a good step forward, but clearly they would want to have the sort of commercial availability of Mythos 5 and any tools to come to market. So we're not quite there yet, but certainly it's a positive step in that process.
Okay, Neil, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's Neil Campling there. Well, we have been monitoring the situation in South Korea. We have been listening with one ear to the President, Lee Jae-myung, talking about plans for investment, massive investment into AI. Of course, South Korea, one of the biggest beneficiaries of the global AI boom. And the plan is for the world's two biggest memory makers, Samsung and SK Hynix, to have a decade of large-scale investments in memory chips, data centers and robotics. So just to bring you some of the latest lines from President Lee, he says that there's massive competition in chips and AI sectors. This is a historical achievement, he says, because Korea needs to accelerate building its chip base to meet demand. He says it needs to develop land, provide cheap water, cheap power as well, needs to expand its chip supply capacity by investment in the southwest. Balanced growth in South Korea, for him, he says, has become a survival tactic. And so this really cements the country's status as a technological powerhouse. The figure that has been reported is $1.3 trillion. And we had seen shares in SK Hynix and Samsung falling in advance of this. We had seen the Kospi down as well. The Kospi is still down 1.3%, so pairing some of the earlier losses. But the stakes really high for the president here, given that his approval rating has been at its lowest level since he took office a year ago. We've got a fantastic T-Live blog on the terminal about all of this. But let's get some analysis now. We can go straight to Seoul and speak to Bloomberg's Kat Barton. Kat, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Just give us some context to this messaging from President Lee this morning. What does it mean for the South Korean memory making industry and also its place in the global AI landscape?
Sure. So President Lee has just been speaking, and he's sitting in the Blue House in the heart of Seoul, and he's flanked by both the chairman of SK Hynix and the chairman of Samsung Electronics. So these are, the two largest memory makers in the world. And they're sitting there smiling as President Lee is announcing this huge project to bring more semiconductor investment to the southwest of South Korea. So he's been talking about how everything at the moment is just concentrated around Seoul, and that those sites are really hitting their limit. They're running short on electricity, they're going to run short on water, and the southwest of the country is ideal for further development. This is what we've just heard President Lee say. He's pointing to the fact that it has plentiful water. It's promising for the government to invest heavily in renewable energy down there, and we're literally just waiting to hear from the industry minister, who's likely to announce a number. The number we've heard this morning is the 1.3 trillion. But let's see if we get that number very soon. And I think, beyond that, it's very significant for South Korea as an AI, powerhouse. They're trying to really capitalize on this moment. The government is really starting to see semiconductors as a kind of, national strategic asset, and they want to be able to capitalize on this moment and make sure that the potential AI boom and the vast excess tax revenues and the real opportunity here is not squandered.
OK, thank you, Kat, for the analysis. And we have South Korea, according to President Lee, aiming to double DRAM production capability in 5 years. That's the latest line. Of course, we, as you say, are waiting for the confirmation of that $1.3 trillion figure. But for now, Bloomberg's Kat Barton, thank you very much. Well, coming up on Daybreak Europe, a plan for growth. We're going to look ahead to Andy Burnham's first big speech since he launched his bid to become the next UK Prime Minister. We'll do UK politics next. This is Bloomberg. We're entering an era where the page turns in the blink of an eye. Speed is the only way to survive. That, according to President Lee of South Korea this morning. We've also been hearing from the industry minister announcing that South Korea plans to invest 800 trillion won to build 4 semiconductor fabs in the country's southwest. So Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix each planning to construct 2 fabs, according to Kim. This is the latest out of South Korea. That presidential briefing ongoing. You can see the reaction in stocks at the moment. And, of course, we have a T-Live blog on the terminal tracking all the twists and turns of this. So do continue to monitor that. Let's turn back to the UK now and to the political situation. Andy Burnham expected to pledge the biggest devolution of power in England later today. The former Mayor of Manchester preparing to give his first major speech since confirming his intention to succeed Keir Starmer as UK Prime Minister. We can get some analysis on this now with our Bloomberg opinion columnist, Rosa Prince. Rosa, good morning. Just like Keir Starmer, of course, Burnham's going to be caught between the fiscal rules, the bond vigilantes and Labour's backbenchers, of course. What do you expect his economic priorities to be for his first 100 days in office, as we're going to hear from him later?
Yeah, well, he is going to pledge a mission to deliver 10 years of growth in every postcard. And his big plan for achieving that, which obviously every prime minister wants, and Keir Starmer himself made a big hallmark of his premiership. So Burnham's going to do something a little different. He's going to say this is going to be all about devolution, about taking power away from Whitehall and handing it to some of Britain's cities and regions, including, we hear, what he's going to describe as a number 10 in the north, a kind of power base in his town of Manchester, where he was the mayor for 9 years. And he's going to hand those regional leaders the levers to achieve economic growth everywhere, he says. And one thing in particular he's going to do is empower them to really tackle Britain's problem of youth unemployment and try to get the economy moving in that way.
A town, Rosa? Manchester, a town? You've been listening to President Donald Trump. But look, I want to know who his Chancellor's going to be. Are we likely to find that out today? Because surely if he's setting out an economic vision, it would make sense to tell us who's going to be next door in Downing Street.
Sorry to disappoint you, Lizzie. Yeah, I want to know who that name is going to be as well, but we are not going to hear who his pick for Chancellor is. And I think that partly is because he doesn't want to sort of get ahead of himself. He still isn't confirmed as the Prime Minister, although it's 100% certain that he will be. But partly, I think, is that question still is not resolved. So the obvious choice for him originally had been Ed Miliband, a close friend of his, someone who's seen as really very good at driving a government department. Sometimes that was a criticism of his colleagues, that they really weren't on top of their brief. They weren't able to implement a plan. Ed Miliband is seen as strong in that way. But in other ways, there are criticisms of Miliband. He's seen as a bit more on the left. Would that be a problem for the markets? He's also resistant to things like drilling in the North Sea. You talked about Donald Trump. Yeah. That's very much something that Trump would be unhappy about. So perhaps the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, more on the centre of the party, if unpopular with some of those left-wing Labour MPs. So still not resolved, Lizzie.
OK, Rosa, we'll look forward to that speech out of Manchester about 11:30 a.m. London time. Bloomberg opinion columnist Rosa Prince there. And coming up, tricky talks on a growing imbalance as EU and Chinese trade chiefs prepare to meet in Brussels. We'll do that next. This is Bloomberg. Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. European and US futures gain as the US and Iran agree to halt strikes ahead of talks set for this week. Meanwhile, South Korea goes big on AI with SK Hynix and Samsung confirming plans to build 2 new semiconductor plants each in a $520 billion project. Plus, Andy Burnham will pledge England's biggest devolution of power in modern times in his first major economic speech as he looks to become the UK's next Prime Minister. Well, a very good morning. Happy Monday if you are just joining us. 6:30 a.m. here in London. This is the picture in markets as we come to the close of Q2, the end of the first half. Asian stocks slipping down 0.2% on the MSCI Asia Pacific Index as we have that rotation out of tech. The Kospi Index down 1.2% despite this key investment announcement out of South Korea. But futures pointing slightly higher in Europe and up 0.5% for Nasdaq futures thanks to the geopolitics. Reports that the US and Iran have pulled back from a fresh escalation of their conflict and that talks will resume in Qatar later on in the week. Now, if you flip cross-asset, Brent is weaker, 0.1% at $71 a barrel. So easing off the session high in correspondence with the geopol. We also have gold declining on the inflation concerns, however, down 1.1% at $4,042 a troy ounce as things stand. And if we look to your bond space, the 10-year Treasury yield up a basis point at 4.37%. We have been looking ahead earlier in the programme to that meeting of central bankers in Sintra, a huge focus on what Kevin Walsh will say, as well as that slew of US jobs reports out throughout the week. Now, let's take a look at our front pages this morning, kicking off with the Financial Times, reporting on that economic speech due from Andy Burnham later today. It says that the Prime Minister in waiting, as he essentially now is going to set out a 10-year mission to raise living standards and pledge to go further on devolution. So that speech taking place in Manchester, of course, we'll be all across that for you. We also, if we have a look at the Wall Street Journal, have that paper warning that a $1 trillion borrowing binge has lifted the stock market to risky heights. It says that leveraged funds and market debt have grown to unprecedented levels this year. Finally, here in Europe, we can look at Les Echos out of France. Their headline reads, "After the heat wave, the government is under fire." The paper saying that all political sides have criticised the French government for its lack of preparation, as well as its handling of the crisis. But you can get a roundup of all the stories you need to know to get your day going in today's edition of Daybreak, which is ever terminal subscribers can find by going to DAYB Go. Now, let's stay in Europe because the European Union's trade chief is to meet with his Chinese counterpart today as the bloc pushes Beijing to address a widening trade imbalance. The meeting comes days after the EU's leaders ordered the Commission to negotiate with China and start preparing possible defensive measures. So let's get some analysis now. We can speak to Bloomberg's Richard Bravo in Brussels. Richard, just talk us through what's on the agenda today for both sides.
Hi. So in this situation, it's really important to understand that from the European side, the EU for the very first time just over a week ago came to a unified agreement that the bloc's relationship with China, its economic relationship with China, is unsustainable and that they need to do something. So as you referred to, the EU leaders gave the European Commission a mandate to come up with stronger trade defense tools so that they can fight back against China, namely overcapacity and what they think are illegal state subsidies. So the message that the EU will be taking to Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao when he arrives in Brussels today is that this economic relationship needs to be rebalanced, and there needs to be some kind of dialogue whereby they can find a better relationship. And the message that the Chinese side will be bringing to Brussels is that they don't want they don't like the sound of these new trade defense weapons, and they want to tamp down any idea in Brussels that they can come up with these new measures without any sort of retaliatory threat from China.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the mood music is really set for productive outcomes here, Richard. You've got Chinese state media accusing the EU of a lack of sincerity. We've also got the EU talk about defensive measures. Is the stage really set for positive outcomes here?
That's a really good question, and it really remains to be seen. As you said, China, for the past few days, has been leaking into Chinese state media that they're really unhappy with what's happening in the EU right now, and that they are prepared to retaliate. And as everyone in the European Commission knows very, very well, if China decides to, they can impose export controls on critical inputs to European industries like car makers and semiconductors, and effectively shut down those industries in a matter of weeks. So the mood music really is not great, and what we're seeing play out in the media doesn't bode well that these talks will go swimmingly.
Okay, Richard, we'll look forward to your coverage of those talks later on today. Bloomberg's Richard Bravio, thank you very much for the preview. Well, let's take a look at some of the other top stories we're following around the world this morning. The Saudi press agency says that a helicopter operated by Saudi Aramco crashed on yesterday, killing all 14 people aboard. The State Energy Ministry says that it happened in the Ras Tanura energy hub, and the victims were all Saudi nationals. It didn't give a cause for the crash. Saudi Aramco had only just resumed loading crude at terminals in the area for shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. Elsewhere, President Putin has acknowledged that Russia is facing persistent fuel supply problems, with motorists and businesses confronting long queues at gas stations. To stabilise the domestic market following refinery outages, Putin says that a full ban on diesel exports is now under consideration. His comments come after Ukrainian drone strikes on refineries reduced fuel production. Plenty more, though, coming up on the programme, so don't go anywhere. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Now, on the 1st of July last year, the US effectively ended operations of the United States Agency for International Development, cutting most staff and moving it into the US State Department. The former US ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, led the agency under President Biden until early 2025. And she's been speaking to David Gura on the Big Take podcast about what she thinks was lost, both internationally as well as at home.
We see with Ebola our rapid response capacity eviscerated. There are still individuals who call themselves people who work on Ebola, but they are too few, they are too dispersed, and many of them lack the expertise that was exported when the USAID staff was terminated so abruptly. The unseen costs are equally dramatic, and that ranges from girls who are no longer getting an education because USAID was either helping support a school to do that or leveraging its other programming in health or clean energy or agriculture to push a government to move in that direction. Villages that won't be electrified. USAID, through its Power Africa program, helped connect about 150 million people to electricity. Most of that was in places that would never have been able to connect to the grid in my lifetime. Pop-up solar panels, private-public partnerships that allowed things to happen at a much more accelerated pace. So the soft power suicide for the United States, I think, is pretty obvious when you pull the rug out from programming of this nature with no warning, with no regard for the human consequences of those actions. That's going to cause, to say the least, a severe trust deficit. But I think when you go behind that as just an argument and think about the families that on a Friday were able to send their female child to school and on a Monday suddenly found that that child was no longer welcome. The family member who goes to get antiretrovirals to treat HIV, which has now become a disease that you can live with thanks to George W. Bush and the PEPFAR program combating HIV around the world, able to get their meds on a Friday, showing up on a Monday, the med's still available, but the pharmacy closed because the health workers laid off because of the cuts that the Trump administration made. So it's all system failure, an all system attack, and there's not one part of human development that has been untouched by this blunder.
That was the former US ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, speaking to Bloomberg's Big Take podcast. Well, of course, another place that was getting a lot of US attention recently was Greenland, the far north nation, attracting investors from across the globe, though some locals are unconvinced. Officials, though, and business leaders within Greenland have argued that the newfound attention presents an opportunity to attract capital, to diversify the economy and eventually to chart a path towards independence. So let's speak now to Sarah Sjolin, who joins us now from Copenhagen. She is our bureau chief there. Morning, Sarah. Just talk to us about what's actually attracting this foreign investment to Greenland. What's the big opportunity?
Well, first of all, Greenland has said it's open for business. For everything that's been going on with the U.S. push and Trump's ideas about taking over Greenland, the island has really now found itself in the middle of both international and local interests. A lot of investors, they're looking to get in on these seemingly endless opportunities. Greenland is rich in minerals, energy, tourism, infrastructure, and defense. And just the infrastructure projects alone, there's been identified more than 6 billion worth of potential projects. So for investors looking outside in, this looks like an area where you could actually potentially make a lot of money, and also for some try to make a difference. Is an area that's going to be increasingly popular, increasingly important for the future.
But is there a sense that Greenland's under pressure for this sort of investment?
Yeah, and I think it's also a pressure that they're putting a little bit on themselves. Greenland, as you also said in the beginning, they have this long-held goal of independence, but it's difficult right now because they have a shrinking native population. There's only 57,000 people living in Greenland, and that number is shrinking. They have a shortage of skilled workers, and the public finances are expected to come under increasing strain in the coming years. They receive about $700 billion from Denmark every year in a grant, and they're really trying to reduce that amount. So they're looking to really make their own place in the world, and by doing so, they need to get foreign investments to be able to really boost their tourism industry, boost their mining industry. They just don't have the capital at the moment to really expand these sectors.
But if you've got all of this money eventually flowing in, surely that would be of some concern to locals as well.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing right now. Greenland is this vast island. We're all seeing the photos. It's very difficult to do business up there. Just like out of infrastructure, if you have a great mining project, there are going to be no roads, no ports. So that in itself is difficult. Then you have all the regulatory hurdles. There's been some really high-profile issues in recent years. This is Australian mining company that's been 15 years developing a mine in the Kvanefjeld area, one of the world's largest untapped rare earth deposits. And then uranium, which also mined at this site, became one of the defining issues in an election, and then it was banned. So we've seen in Greenland from time to time that some of these issues become hostage to local politics. And for foreign investors, that's one of the things they're concerned about. We're also seeing for tourism, which is now booming in Greenland. They introduced a new law that 2/3 of the ownership has to be local in order to preserve some of the money, the profit they're making. They see Iceland as this example of how bad things can turn. Iceland has this great tourism boom, but a lot of the money has left the country because of international investors coming in, setting up tour operators, and then the capital has flown out again. So that's what they're trying to balance. They want to attract the capital, but at the same time, they also don't want to give up too much control. And Greenland is, as I said, it's small. It's maybe not used to these really big investment projects. So foreign investors are finding that it's very slow, the regulatory hurdles, there's just a lot of obstacles. So right now we're seeing this paradox of Greenland saying it's open for business, but it's really a question of whether they want it or not.
OK, Sarah, thanks so much for bringing us this story. That's Bloomberg's Sarah Sjolin out of Copenhagen. Now, I want to just turn back to Korea because we've now got the Kospi in positive territory, up 0.4% off the back of the latest lines from this announcement coming out of the presidential office. We're hearing that Samsung and SK Hynix are going to build 2 chip fabs each in a $518 billion project. Korea is set to spend $19.4 billion over the next 15 years on next-gen memory capacity. capacity. But the latest lines are that the South Korea will be spending more than 1,000 trillion won on AI data centres by 2035. So the Kospi erasing its previous 3.4% loss, now trading up, as I say, 0.4%. But the redhead that crossed the terminal earlier this hour was that Samsung and SK Hynix will build these 2 chip fabs each in this 800 trillion won project. So we continue to monitor this, President Lee hoping at least that this is going to turn around his position in the polls. But we're hearing from the industry minister as well with the details on where this investment will be targeted. Well, coming up on the programme, the Prosus and Naspers Group CEO Fabricio Bloisi is going to be joining me to discuss their full-year results. Tech investing on the agenda as well, and we'll also talk about the company's acquisition drive. So don't go anywhere. That conversation coming up next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, 6:50 a.m. here in London. Well, we've had breaking earnings out of Prosus Naspers Group earlier this hour. Just recapping those, they see profitability jumping 84% and free cash flow up $2 billion over 3 years. We can dive into these results now, I'm pleased to say, with the Prosus Group CEO, Fabricio Bloisi. He joins me now here in London. Good to have you with us, Fabricio. Thank you so much for making time. Just give us your message to shareholders broadly off the back of these results this quarter.
Good morning, Lizzie. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited about the results. We are going up, as you just said, 85% in profits, $2 billion in cash flow. I think our ecosystem strategy is working. We are delivering results. We are moving faster. We're innovating as fast as ever with AI. So I'm very excited about the next steps. So
you've been on an acquisition drive. What's Prosus looking for when it decides on targets?
Right now, I'm looking forward to keep delivering the results. We made 3 big acquisitions last year. We expanded $6 billion in Europe, $2 billion in Latin America. The biggest question my shareholders had is, can you really make those companies work better? And we did it. Just Eat is growing much faster, from -9% to 4%. Despegar is growing 30%. It was growing 10% before we acquired it. La Central is moving faster. So my big priority now is not make bigger acquisitions, to make sure that we can deliver our plans of having an amazing, the best ecosystem in Latin America, India, and Europe, and we are delivering that.
Well, let's take those in turn then. What's the integration roadmap for the Just Eat acquisition?
We acquired Just Eat just 6 months ago. We started to operate. The company was going down -9% by the day we started to operate it. Now it's going down -4%. But the good news is we expect in the next very few months to start growing again. How we are doing that? Through technology, through a culture of growth, and through our big vision that is Europe deserves big European champions. And we are sure we are going to deliver that with Just Eat.
And when it comes to the Delivery Hero stake sale, there are so many moving parts around the sell down of the stake as a result of the Just Eat acquisition. What would be the ideal outcome for Prosus in terms of selling or not selling the rest of your Delivery Hero stake?
Look, we really believe Europe deserves big tech champions based here. We are talking about that for 1 year. I put $6 billion on this thesis, and I'm going to deliver that. I think Europe sometimes fight against its own European companies, different than the Americans and the Chinese. We sold down. We are not the #1 shareholder of Delivery Hero anymore. It is Uber now. So the next step, we have to ask Dara. Let's ask Dara more. I'm going to keep focusing making Just Eat being the global, most innovative and fastest growing company. That's our focus now. And I don't have any other news on Delivery Hero, unfortunately, because I keep thinking Europe deserves really big global champions. I'm going to keep fighting for that. On the Delivery Hero case, it was not what I expected. We sold a lot, but that's part of life. Let's keep fighting for creating that.
But maybe you can tell us if there are any specific business units within Delivery Hero that Prosus prefers to others.
No, I can't tell you anything about rumors. There are many rumors in the market. I'm going to keep waiting for the next Uber. They are the new biggest shareholder of Delivery Hero. Unfortunately, it was a European company until 1 month ago. Part of life. I have now to wait to see the next results.
How are talks going with the EU regulator on this, though?
Look, as I told you, I interact a lot with Americans and Chinese players, and we see Trump fighting for their companies all the time. We see the Chinese fighting for their companies all the time. Here in Europe, I feel I'm fighting against the European regulators. Not that they are fighting for us, they are fighting against us. It's a big mistake because we need to have really big global tech leaders in Europe. We need to have that. So Prosus invested 6 billion on that. We're not talking about that. We are delivering on that. Our companies are growing faster here. And we keep pressuring Europe. It's time to move faster. We have some Europe sometimes say we agree and that's the vision, that's the Mario Draghi vision. But they are not moving fast enough. And we are going to keep complaining until we create an amazing global tech companies here. That's what Prosus are going to do.
OK, got it loud and clear. Let's turn to Tencent now. What's the plan to close the holding company discount to your Tencent stake?
Tencent is doing very well. Tencent is talking much more about AI, and there is lots of expectations in the market that they are going to do good AI moves. We really believe that the future of Chinese internet is going to be, Tencent is going to be very important on that. It is already. But at the same time, Prosus now is delivering $1.5 billion in cash flow. It's $2 billion more than just 3 years ago. So I'm very confident that it's not a Tencent minus story. It's a Tencent plus Prosus story where we are going to deliver $1 billion in profit. We are ready to deliver this year $1.3 billion in profit, a few $1 billion more than 2 years ago. So I think this discount is going to naturally reduce because people are going to realize we have an European champion just delivering results in terms of profitability, in terms of growth, and more than that, in terms of innovation. We are in a moment of having AI champions is a requirement for Europe. And Prosus is training models here with more data than everyone else. We are moving faster in creating agentic services, and now we are pushing that for 5 million restaurants all around the world. We are pushing AI innovation to 1 billion customers all around the world, and the results are already, the results are here. I am confident we will have very good results for many years.
OK, really appreciate you making time for us this morning. Fabricio Bloisi, Prosus and Naspers Group CEO there, off the back of the company's results this morning. The redhead is that Prosus's full-year adjusted EBITDA comes in at $1.05 billion, beating the estimate of $947.3 million. Well, we've got a busy week ahead. Of course, we've got Sintra starting off today. We have the euro area inflation data coming on Wednesday. The jobs report on Thursday, a day earlier because, of course, it is the July 4th holiday coming up. So the opening trade will be prepping you for all of that. It's up next. This is Bloomberg.